Hi everyone. I was contacted the other day by a fan who asked me to comment on two video clips by people I absolutely adore. And I was aware of the first one by Jordan Peterson, where he discusses his thoughts on MGTOW. The second, which is from Bill Burr podcast, I haven't had a chance to look at yet. I'm going to spend this video addressing the things that Jordan Peterson said. And I just want to say, because these two men are essentially two of my favorite public figures / personalities ever, and that I've really made no secret of it, I kind of knew when I saw the clip from Jordan Peterson that I would be asked to make some kind of comment on that. So yeah, let's get started.
Well, here's the decomposition of the fundamental archetype. There's a whole group online called Men Going Their Own Way, MGTOW. That's a very interesting group to go study. There's lots of them. I don't know how many of them there are, and most of them are older. Many of them are men who've been through a particularly horrifying divorce for one reason or another.
Now, it's here where I'm forced to consider the possibility that Peterson, Jordan, is not as well informed about MGTOW as he might think. You know, lots of them, and I don't know how many of them there are. That kind of indicates that there's really, that he hasn't actually studied it to the degree that one would expect. And I'm not going to suggest that there's a way to do any kind of head count regarding MGTOW, partly because I suspect that most MGTOW have never even heard of MGTOW. You know, like most of them are just men doing their own thing and avoiding taking on traditional expectations. I mean, we used to call those kinds of men confirmed bachelors. Now, most of them are older. I don't know about that. Most of the MGTOW I know are in their 20s or 30s. Many of them have been through a particularly horrifying divorce. Yeah, might be true. I don't know how many out of the total. Barbarossa hasn't, as far as I know, been through a divorce. Neither has Stardust, as far as I know. They were the first two MGTOW I ever stumbled across. I would suggest to you, Jordan, that many MGTOW, as opposed to having been through a divorce, have maybe witnessed their fathers or their friends' fathers or their friends or their brothers go through a divorce and have seen how that tends to play out. I think they've also been watching the cultural narrative, and they have an understanding that society is much less forgiving of failure on the part of men than women. So I'm just going to give you an example, and this is an anecdotal one, but I think it's illustrative. So, when a man cheats, he's a dog, full stop. Any attempt to explain, let alone excuse his behavior, will be met with social condemnation. Now, I have an acquaintance who's at the moment in a very difficult marriage. When they got married, they were both high earners, and they purchased a home and lived a lifestyle based on their combined income of about $325,000 a year. Now, when they had a child, his wife changed the original deal they'd made. She unilaterally decided to deviate from the plan. She wasn't interested in going back to work in her old position. She was working full time at a high level, and this particular kind of job is not the kind of job you can do part time. After 6 months, she wasn't ready to return to work at all. After 18 months, she decided she would go back part time, earning less than a third of what she had been earning previously. Now, at this point, he suggested they sell the house that they had purchased in this beautiful, nice neighborhood and buy a more modest one and essentially live within their new means. You can guess how well that suggestion went over. So now he's working 60 to 70 hours a week, often hundreds or even thousands of miles away from home, to maintain the lifestyle that she's demanding. Now, one day a few months ago over the phone, he told my partner, and I'm quoting, I haven't seen my kid in a month or my wife's vagina in 6. If this keeps up, I'm gonna cheat. Something's gotta give. And it's not like she's happy either, which is probably why he hasn't had a glimpse of her vagina in ages. She complains to him constantly that he's never around, and when he is around, he's not emotionally available. Now, why isn't he around? Because he's doing exactly what she is demanding of him, and that means being away. Why is he emotionally unavailable? Because I think if he actually told her how he feels about this situation, if he actually opened up and let it out, I can pretty much guarantee she'd pack up that kid and leave. I mean, she'd have to do that unless she was prepared to take responsibility for her part in the shit show that their marriage has become. And given how she's been thus far, I don't think she's gonna do that. She's not prepared to contribute financially to the lifestyle she herself is demanding. She's not prepared to tolerate him doing what it takes to maintain the lifestyle she's demanding. And she's definitely not prepared to take a good hard look at the position she's put him in, where he's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, and both damned outcomes involve him losing his kid and paying alimony through the nose because, she gave up her career to provide him with a kid he barely sees. Now, does he drop the feelings bomb now, become truly emotionally available to her? Or does he tie himself in knots trying to keep her from leaving for one more day, and then another, and then another? And what exactly would happen if this guy who's putting himself through all of this because it's what his wife is demanding of him, what would society have to say about him if he did cheat on her with, say, a prostitute in a work town who's willing to give him the girlfriend experience and listen without judgment across the pillow to his darkest thoughts about his situation? What a disgusting, weak man, just after sex, and someone to whine to like a stunted adolescent playing the victim. Now what, might I ask, would society say if she hooked up with an old flame on Facebook and had an affair? Well, how could we blame her? He was emotionally unavailable. He neglected her. He wasn't fulfilling her needs. She felt isolated and alone, stuck at home with a kid, which happens to be exactly where she insisted on being, and he's just not there for her, which happens to be exactly where she insisted on him being. She certainly deserves better than this guy, and her happiness is the most important thing, after all. Now, I've said before that no one, even in this day and age, bats an eye when a woman rips a page out of a home and garden magazine, hands it to her husband, and says, "Make the yard look like this." But can you even imagine for a second the howls of outrage from everybody if he ripped a page out of a culinary magazine, handed it to his wife, and said, "Make this for dinner tonight"? And at the same time, men aren't allowed to expect their wives to replace the car battery either, or carry the lion's share of the groceries, or shovel the walk, or cut the grass, or clean the gutters. We women are still allowed to expect things of men, all the things we used to, and more. We're allowed to expect a man to bust his hump earning the income we demand, and we're also allowed to expect him to help with the housework and childcare and to be emotionally available, which is really just code for them telling us what we want to hear. Men, on the other hand, aren't allowed to expect from their women any of the traditional things because that would be regressive. But they're certainly not allowed to expect non-traditional things because then they're freeloaders leeching off their wives, or boys sitting in the car letting their women fill the gas tank. The horror. And I'm going to give you another example, anecdotal, of this. My guy and I used to rent my sister's condo. We had a neighbor who would sit on her porch and smoke and enjoy the sun. Now, when he and I would go grocery shopping, when we come home, I would grab as many bags as I could reasonably carry out of the trunk, and he would take the rest. And that was just the way we did things. And sometimes that meant that I was carrying more groceries than he was. Oh my goodness. Our neighbor would sit and watch this over the course of 2 summers, and then, after we had moved out and my sister moved back in, she says to my sister that my man is a bum. She said he let me do all the heavy lifting and was obviously just a freeloader, just a man-child, following me around while I did all the work. Now, never mind that he's always worked more hours than I do, has almost always earned more money than I do, and that he willingly contributes financially toward me and toward my kids, who are not his. Never mind that without him and his willingness to share his income in this way, I would be unable to live the life I live and do the work I love, which is this. Forget all that, or don't even find out about it in the first place. All that woman needed to know is that sometimes I carry more grocery bags than he does from the trunk of the car to the door. And that alone is enough indication that he is not complying with his masculine role, and that makes him a bum. He's leeching off me. He's just a deadbeat taking advantage of a woman. And that, Jordan, is exactly where men are right now.